in this lecture we will learn about functions. Okay, so functions are code blocks that perform some specific task. Okay, so they perform specific task for you, and that task, any task that you take, so it involves, okay, some input, that okay, you provide some input to the task, that okay, what are the parameters that it takes, okay, and then it produces some output. Okay, so this is the functionality of any block you see. Okay, any program, any algorithm you see, so it takes some input, okay, it works on it, it processes it, and then it produces output. Okay, so this is done in C++ or C using what is known as functions. So functions have, the main functionality is it helps you write modular code. Okay, so which means that it is a block of code which performs some work on given input and it produces output. Okay, and so we will see, so for example, if you see, let's say we want to find area of a rectangle, okay, or perimeter of a rectangle. Okay, so for that, if there is a person and you want him to calculate the area of rectangle, so you will have to give him some input parameters, and here for this example it will be length, okay, and the width. These two parameters you have to give. Okay, now in C++, as you know, that for every variable you need to define its data type. So let's say that we have int length and int width. Okay, so these are the parameters that we pass. You can pass any number of parameters. Okay, so for example, if you are trying to calculate area of circle, okay, so you just need to pass the radius of the circle as parameter as the input, then you will get the output by finding pi r square. Okay, if you want to find the area of rectangle, you need length and breadth of the rectangle. If you want to find the volume of a cuboid, then you need to know the length, breadth, and as well as the height. Okay, so three parameters will be needed. So the number of input parameters might be different. Okay, so this is one case. Now let's see what else can differ. Okay, then what might happen is that the type of parameters also might be different. Okay, so in our case, so let's say that we want one example, let's take, where the type of parameters can also be different, the input types. So one thing can be, let's say we are taking attendance. Okay, so attendance, if you are taking, so the name will be a string type. Okay, so the name of the student will be a string, and then let's say we are also taking his age. Okay, so it can be int or float age. Okay, so these two are different parameters. Then is he present or not, that can be a boolean variable. Okay, so these three different parameters are there. Okay, now what we said is that we also process that input and we need to find some output. Okay, so how we find the output? So we calculate. Okay, so for, let's say, and whenever you have a function, it will of course have a name which will tell what it does. Okay, so something like that. So find volume, let's say I have a function and give it a name find volume. Okay, and I pass parameters int length, int breadth, and int height. Okay, so these are the three parameters that I pass, and we have a function name find volume. Okay, and in braces I give the function, the parameters. Okay, the parameter type, data type of parameter, and the name of the parameter. Then we find that okay, the volume int volume is equal to length into breadth into height. Okay, so this we calculate. Then what you need to do, you need to return that. Okay, so we use a specific keyword return, and then in bracket we will say volume. Okay, so this we return, and return type is written, so whatever the type of return is, we will, of course, here we will return the result which is integer, so we will say it's of int type, which we write before the function name. Okay, so this is the idea. So let's now see one concrete example of code. So we have one example in which we have finding the area of rectangle. Okay, so we have integer type is the return, get area is the name of the function, in braces we write int length, so length is of type int and width is also of type int. Okay, then what happens, we have one function for finding parameter. So you can, when you are declaring, okay, so there is another thing which is declaration, and another thing is definition. Okay, so these are the two things. So declaration, I just declare the prototype of the function, that what is the function name, what are the parameter it takes, and what is the return type. Definition, we basically tell how the function is working, we write the code for that. Okay, so these three are the definitions of the function. We have three functions: get area, get parameter, another one is get grade. Okay, so let's see what happens here in int main. So we have length and breadth of the rectangle given, then we call get area. So now what happens, you have a piece of code that does some work for you. So if you have a person also who does some work, so you have to call him to say that, okay, please do that work for me. Okay, so how you do it in C++, you will say get area, just call that function name, write it here, get area. Now you see from the declaration what are the parameter it needs. It needs the length and the breadth. Okay, so I give length and breadth, my length, my breadth, to this function, and I call this. Okay, when you do this, it will also, after the function executed, it will return some value, okay, which will be printed here. So this is for get area. So what is the benefit of writing function? Okay, so let's see, the main benefit of writing a function is that it helps us make the code, okay, less repeatable. Okay, so we don't need to repeat the code just for different set of parameters. Okay, so we can just change the parameters and we can have the same logic run for different type parameters. That is one benefit. Okay, so for example, get area here will work for any rectangle. Okay, so the rectangle can have length and breadth 4,3, 2,1, 35, 45. It will work for anything. Okay, but if you don't write function, then you have to write the piece of code, whole piece of code in the function body repeatedly for different set of values. So now we will see one such example where it becomes very cumbersome. So let's try to run some code. Okay, so we will first, very simply, we will look at some code. Okay, so let's try to see some. So I will put something here. So we will see some code here, and let's try to build it. Okay, and now what we do, we run the code. So area of rectangle is 12, perimeter of rectangle is 14. Okay, so now let's try to see how it is happening. We have get area here, get perimeter, and we call these two functions. Okay, here get area, my length, my breadth, we call like this. And now let's try to see here, get area is defined here. Okay, it returns length into breadth. Okay, and get perimeter is defined here, so it returns twice into length plus breadth. So now you can say that, okay, we are writing a function and it's just a one line code, so it might, what are we gaining? Okay, So we can say this is a very small logic, but if your logic is big, then the code becomes quite big. So for example, let's take a code which helps us to find a grade of a person. Okay, so what happens here is, let's see. So we have a grade which is from 10 to 4. Okay, if someone gets from greater than 90 out of 100, someone gets greater than 90, he gets a grade of 10. Between 90 and 80, he gets grade 9. Between 70 and 80, a grade 8. Between 70 and 60, grade 7, and like this. So a lot of cases are there. Okay, so around 7 cases are there. And you see that if we have a lot of marks, like I have 7 marks here, so what happens then, and let us store the grades of these for these marks in G1, G2, G3, G4, G5, G6 and G7. So now just to find the grade of the first person, you can see the code length, it is quite long, okay, a bit long. And the same logic we again apply here for marks 2. Again we have to write the same code, and we see that the code is almost same, just the parameters are different. Okay, M2 is different here, that we are checking. So if you see like this, so we see that the code is becoming repeated and only few parameters are different. So instead of here, what I can do, only marks is one parameter, input parameter, and grade is the output parameter. So I can write a function get grade. The input parameter is marks, which is of type int. It returns the grade, which is of type int. So what happens if marks is greater than 90, grade is 10, like this if you do. So you have a code, the function is here. Now what I need to do, for these 2 marks, I can just simply write, let's see, so I can remove these 2 code, and now I can very simply write, okay, so get grade M1. Okay, so this code now will be, so G1 is equal to this. Now again for G2 is equal to get grade M2, and so this becomes for M2, and we can just copy this code, we can call the same function. Okay, so now it becomes so much simpler. So instead of such a big code, now we have just 2 lines of code and a function which will do the work for us. Okay, now you can do cout. Okay, so grade 1 is G1 and grade 2 is G2. Okay, so this will suffice. Okay, and let's see. So now if we just run this code, so build, so there are few warnings that we have not used these variables. Okay, if you can see, so we are not using quite a few variables. Okay, and this control reaches non-void, so control reaches end of non-void function. So just let's see what is happening. So let's try to see here. So we are not returning the grade, so that is the problem. So we should return a grade, return grade. So now it will build fine. Okay, at least that warning will not be there, unused warning will be there, and now there are 0 errors. So if we run this, so now grade 1 is 4, grade 2 is 6. So we get, by just calling 2 functions, we get the grade. Okay, so this was about functions and why it is necessary. So I hope you understand the importance of functions, how we declare the function, how we define the function, and what are the input parameters, what is the body of the function, and how we write the output. So thanks a lot.